So I'm going to call the March 10th, 2020 meeting of the East Long Meadow Planning Board to order. Those in attendance are Jonathan Torsha, George Kingston, myself, Russell Denver, and Ty Richards. Before the first item of business, I'm required to inform everyone that we are being recorded by LCAT, and if there is anyone else in the audience who may be recording the meeting, would you please state your name? Hearing none. The first order of business would be the approval of the February 4th, 2020 Planning Board minutes, meeting minutes. Everybody have an opportunity to review them? Anybody have any edits, revisions? Do I have a motion to?
Motion to approve.
To approve. Do I have a second?
Second that.
So we have a motion made and approved to approve the February 4th, 2020 meeting minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed say nay. Hearing none, that matter passes. The next is the approval of the February 18th, 2020 Planning Board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion made and second to approve the February 18th, 2020 meeting minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed say nay. Hearing none, that matter passes. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, we have to approve the minutes of January 21st, 2019.
Okay.
I have them here unsigned, so I'm assuming they must need approval.
I'll make a motion to approve. I don't remember whether we did them or not, but we
Okay.
can do it again. I'll second that.
So motion made and seconded to approve the meeting minutes of January 21? 2000, wait, that says 21.
Yeah, that's gotta be a mistake there.
2020. Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed say nay. Hearing none, that matter passes. You can call the first item.
And I did not have the minutes for the middle one that we approved to sign.
Okay, so we'll get to February 18th, excuse me, February 18th.
Okay, case site 2019-11 ground-mounted solar facility. Request by applicant for the installation of a 4-megawatt ground-mounted solar facility at Rear Pease Road, assessors parcel ID 33-1-0, located in 21.26 plus or minus acres in a residential double-A zoning district. The applicant is Steve Royer, PLH LLC, 222 South 9th Street, Suite 1600, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Continued from November 19th, December 3rd, December 17th, January 21st, and February 4th.
So it's our understanding that the petitioner appeared in front of the East Long Meadow Zoning Board of Appeals last evening. Connie, would you give a report of what occurred at the meeting?
Yes.
Not yet, please. Not yet, please.
So last evening, the zoning board of appeals did approve the request or the petition for variance at 0 Pease Road. They did condition approval based on several stipulations, those being that an intermunicipality agreement between Connecticut and Massachusetts in writing be provided to the town of East Long Meadow Planning and Community Development Department for our records. They asked for a memo from the chief of police stating that he was that the plans met with his approval in regard to public safety. And a draft, they did want to make sure that the draft of the easement or the deed restriction, depending on how the lease was written, was provided to the town, Planning and Community Development Department. And they wanted the Siting Commission in Connecticut to provide a letter of approval that the extension from the Summers property into the Massachusetts parcel was acceptable to Connecticut because that is the ingress egress to the site, and that access road construction meets with the construction standards for the town by the Department of Public Works.
The first item you referenced was the intermunicipal agreement?
Yes.
What would be the contents of that?
It would be a mutual aid understanding, mutual aid agreement. The Zoning Board of Appeals would like to see this agreement in writing.
Okay. So, Mr. Torsia, I understand you attended. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think Connie kind of addressed it really well. The big debate was, I think the ZBA, and correct me if I'm wrong, Connie, felt that the frontage on Bilton Road was sufficient to cover the East Long Meadow lot. And that if you kind of basically take away the state line, it's almost as if it's sort of one property, even though technically it's two different deeds or pieces of land. So that was sort of their rationale for approving this variance, that they already have it, it just happens to be in another community, another state. But that would serve its purpose.
The hardship was the shape of the parcel as it was located in two different states.
Okay. Gentlemen, sorry, just wanted to get that out there first. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, you stole some of little bit of my thunder, if it was thunder and even all. Just, I presume you would know that we had our hearing last night and that the variance was approved. The conditions that Connie recited, I think, are fair summary of them, and the petitioner has no issue with them. For example, the Siting Commission in Connecticut, at the time, they just showed the Flathead Road going to the Massachusetts line, and in our plans it goes through, and the chairman asked that just have Connecticut approve that the road goes through, and so that they've seen it. They very much appreciated the fire chief's email, so that said, I've spoken to the Summers fire chief, we've worked it out, we're all set. He wanted just a similar letter from the police chief, and then Mark said, if you can get some sort of intermunicipal agreement that says we're going to cooperate on this. And one gentleman on the board, I think, who must be in fire safety or something, said, we do this all the time, so it didn't sound like it was, we go into other towns or communities when we need to help out. So, we've been through our plans. Mr. Boyer came back from Minnesota. If you have any questions about the plans, I might be a little sick of seeing them at this point, but they are, the latest version, I think, met all of the requirements and all the questions that this board had asked for changes to be made. All the requirements for review were submitted in terms of fire chief, DPW, so I think the meeting before, I had asked the board, is there anything else we need to submit or do? And we were told no, and then the Pill memo came up, and so I think we've addressed that.
I think I said, to the best of my knowledge, there was nothing else that we would require.
Well,
And you pushed back, and I reminded you, I said, to the best of my knowledge, so let's just put it there.
well, we
So,
have a
but
different,
yes.
we have a different memory of that, but I'm not gonna quibble over it.
That happens often.
Yeah, I'm not gonna quibble over it.
does.
But in any event,
But-
I think we've provided you everything you've requested. If not, let us know, we're right here.
Okay.
But we think we're ready to have the board vote on it if the board's ready to do so.
Questions from the board?
I don't have any questions at this point. I think the variance isn't actually granted until we get the requirements that the board asked for, that the ZBA asked for. So,
No, excuse me for that. That's the variance, the way I understood it from the meeting last night, Connie was there and John was there, is that those are conditions in the variance, but the variance will be granted and then it will be filed.
provided the conditions are met.
The variance will be drafted, filed with the clerk.
Right.
And then it is only complied with when the conditions are met. And there's a 20-day period, as you know, and we intend to get that information during that period.
So gentlemen, if
Yes.
I may, so we have a 14-day window to prepare the decision and submit it to town clerk for stamp. date stamped, and that's at that point, the 20-day appeal period, time clock starts ticking. So generally, when I'm talking with people, and they want to know when can we put the shovel in the ground, or when can I obtain my building permit, I always caution on the side of 35 days from the date of the meeting. So the ZBA meeting was last evening. I have 14 days to prepare the decision, so that was, the 9th? So that'll bring us to the 23rd, and then an additional 20-day appeal period. So I know that, you might want to, and I don't mean to speak for the board, but in many cases, boards wait until all of the permitting documents are in place before the planning board goes ahead and says, we approve whatever, the site plan, the special permit, the subdivision. So all the documents are collected, that way there's nothing outstanding.
And all filed at the same time.
Yes, and you have everything in place. So that's just my 2 cents based on my experience as a professional planner, having worked in different municipalities. We tie up all of our strings so that we don't have anything dangling.
Okay. Any other questions? What's the pleasure?
Yeah, I have a few things. I'm really wrestling with this, and I come from the same school that Danny Plotkin comes from, who we were with yesterday. We're both real estate developers. We both have sat before boards like this hundreds of times looking for variances over the years, and I've heard hundreds of speeches why either I don't get the variance, or why it needs to be modified, or what the purpose of a variance is, and why it's only if there's a hardship, and, I've heard the speech 1,000 times, I can just about repeat it back. So, based on a conversation I had with Danny this afternoon about this very topic, which is more about the definition of a variance and why they're required as opposed to this particular project, even though it is certainly related, I'm more inclined to vote no, even though I logically can clearly see, what you're trying to accomplish and how it all come together. So my feeling is, instead of voting tonight, and you really can't do anything until you have these contingencies resolved anyways. I mean, you've got a permit from the zoning, or you got approval from the zoning board, but you really can't do anything with it until these 4 or 5 things have been satisfied. I would rather wait, see what these look like, or I can vote now, but I think it's a pretty good idea of where my vote is gonna be. And I don't know if my vote is even gonna change anyways, but at least I'm being transparent on what my feeling is about this.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Richards, but your vote is on the site design review. That's what this planning board is voting on. And if there's an issue you can identify about the site design review, in terms of what the qualifications are for site design review and whether or not they haven't been satisfied, that's a very different question than whether or not you agree the zoning board should or should not have granted a variance. Fact of the matter is, they granted the variance. So the variance has been granted. The only objection prior to this that I was aware of, there may be others, was an issue and question of frontage. That frontage question is satisfied by the Zoning Board of Appeals. They granted the variance. The question is, this board can certainly vote that site design review requirements have been met and approve the site design review, subject to the issuance of the variance as opposed to the vote after it's recorded with the clerk. But I believe your question strays out of the jurisdiction of this board, just like last night, as the chairman cautioned, we're not getting into the nitty-gritty of the site design review of this project. We're addressing the issue of frontage. And unless I misunderstood you, you're saying you're struggling with the issue that Danny did on whether or not it's, that is not, in my opinion, within your purview. If you look at the plans that Steve has brought here on multiple occasions to show, the environmental conservation issue, the road, the screening, the waivers, that's the site design review. So I would ask you to tell me what about the site design review you're struggling with as opposed to the variance.
I would ask our, through the chair.
Sure.
Ask our director, if we were to vote on this tonight and approve it, and the variance were to be appealed to land court, what happens if land court were to reverse the ruling?
Well, that's why you wait until you have all your documents in place, so you avoid.
That's my thinking.
Yeah.
I just,
And it'd still be appealed if we got all the
So,
documents.
Mr. Kingston, I think if I could,
Through
please.
the chair.
Through the chairman, yeah. If the variance is appealed, the petitioner, I believe under the law, takes the risk if they build the project and they lose the variance, if that in fact what happens. But it does not prohibit the petitioner from moving forward because they had a vote from the board. They take it at their risk, and that's what happens.
Isn't the petitioner then putting the cart before the horse? Because there still is a suit in land court.
This-
There, the judge just asked the town, or asked the planning board, to consider this under site plan review, but the primary issue of whether the town's current zoning is too restrictive is still in play.
Well, it's not, I don't believe it's in play, other than for the judge to issue a final ruling,
Which could be.
which could be appealed. But it's not in play. They have a summary judgment order that the judge said, go back to the planning board and submit this for site design review, which the parties agreed to do, the town and the developer agreed to do. And that's what we've been doing for all these dates that you just read off. So the judge will issue a final order when, as I understand it, after this board takes its action. And if the town wishes to appeal that decision, that's up to them. But the basic law is that the petitioner then takes the risk, just like you take the risk when you do something within the 20-day appeal period. It's no different. You could forfeit whatever you've done or put into it, but does not prohibit you unless somebody enjoins you from doing so. So it goes back to, and thank you for pointing that out, that the judge has said, go back to the planning board for site design review. And one of the issues that the town addressed to us was the frontage issue as a part of site design review. And that's what the zoning board of appeals did last night. They addressed that issue and said there's adequate frontage on Bilton Road. We're gonna grant the variance from requirement of frontage in East Long Meadow.
So if we vote and approve this, and the variance that was granted by the ZBA is later invalidated in land court, basically our approval is invalidated as well. Is that correct?
I would say yes, but Mr. Martin, you do more land law than I do, so.
I would say
Yeah.
no. Your approval of the site design review is not negated, but we'd have a challenge getting a building permit which would not be subject to challenge. You can always build at your risk, but it would be a problem if the variance was overturned and that by saying that the frontage requirement must be met in East Long Meadow. As an aside, I'm not concerned about that because I've always been the opinion that what the zoning board decided last night was correct. But it does not invalidate your decision that the site design review meets the standards of the East Long Meadow review.
So if the variance got hypothetically struck down, we approve the design though, but that would be essentially moot in that situation.
Well, it would have to come back, or I shouldn't say will. It could possibly come back if the board wanted to make a determination on variance. Your own counsel, your new counsel, Mr. Pill, says you don't have anything to do with frontage. That's why we went to the
ZBA.
So that's why I don't think your approval, one of the reasons why I don't think your approval would be it revoked or invalid. You've made it on a determination of what you can determine it on. He advised you in his memo that you had no authority to address the issue of frontage, which goes back to my question to you. You're struggling with a variance in frontage. I don't believe you have any jurisdiction or authority to address that issue in a site design review.
So Connie, you are the town's representative and you staff the ZBA. So do you recall the exact motion of the ZBA to approve the variance? And did it include the conditions?
The zoning board of appeal of Charles Gregg moved to approve the application for variance for frontage with the following conditions. So the conditions have to be satisfied. These are conditions subsequent to the approval. You can't, this is why you don't like to grant a site plan or subdivision or special, any permit that comes before you with conditions because they're outstanding and they remain to be completed.
Right.
So I just quickly went to our site plan review section of our zoning bylaw. And what I'm looking for is verbiage that says you have to have all of your documents in place, or it is recommended. And as I scroll through, again, what I told you earlier is just a standard of practice that we employ as planners to protect the town. Applications are submitted concurrently, but and you have to take a chance, somebody's going to say yes before somebody else, but you are the planning board, and you grant applicants site plan approval. And you have other, just like you would need recommendations through the Conservation Commission. As part of your decision, you have a variance that is part of your site plan approval. So, again, I'm just scrolling quickly to see if I can't find the verbiage within the body of our bylaw.
So I'd like to just ask for a quick recess so Connie can just review the.
Sure.
So I have a motion to recess for 5 minutes.
Recess for 5 minutes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Connie, do you want to report what your findings would be?
So under 7.45 administration, under site plan review, approval may be made subject to conditions, modifications, and restrictions as the planning board may deem necessary. And any construction, reconstruction, alteration, or addition shall be carried out only in conformity with such conditions, modifications, or restrictions, and in conformity with the application and site plan. So I think that language where you're stating conditions verbally, you want this information prior to granting site plan approval. I think that is what you're looking for. That's the verbiage you need. Sure, you could. Why we don't do this, is because we have seen developers not comply. And the next thing, what I've heard so many times is, it's easier to beg for forgiveness. Finish the sentence.
Okay.
So it's within your power to say, let's continue this until the variance, we see that there's no appeal to the variance. That's-
Okay. So let's take it back to the board. So it's a public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to this issue that might be in the audience? So hearing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I would recommend against
Hold
that.
on. Go ahead.
I would recommend it because if you close the public hearing, you can't take any more testimony, which means that you can't take into account the documentation that's supposed to be provided to
Okay.
the
Good point.
ZBA.
All right.
So I would recommend against closing it.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I don't, I guess I'm missing something here in this discussion, George, because you close public hearing all the time and make a vote that require information submitted to the planning board after the issuance of the decision.
But this is information that was not requested by the planning board, it was requested by the ZBA. The ZBA is a party to this hearing in part, and therefore we could not accept something from them.
They are not a party to this hearing. I think Mr. Denver will come.
And we made, you requested and we approved to continue the public hearing so you could seek a
Which we did.
variance.
Right.
But he said the ZBA is a party to this
Because
hearing.
they're providing us with the information that they issued the variance. I've been through this on other projects, okay? I'm very leery about closing the public hearing unless we're ready to go immediately to a vote, because otherwise you cannot accept anything. And
Okay. So what's the pleasure?
I'll give you my personal opinion, I agree with the director that there are too many loose ends here, that this needs to get tied up, and then we can vote on it. Because the frontage is an issue of site plan. The only reason that we're allowed to consider a zero frontage versus the normal frontage is because of the variance. If the variance does not have all its conditions satisfied, then we're still looking at a site plan whose frontage does not agree with zoning. And it's only once the variance is finalized that we should vote on it. That's my personal opinion.
Anyone else? Jonathan?
I'm wrestling with it because I see if the client wants to take the risk that would be associated with us voting on it this evening, and if we were to hypothetically approve it this evening, that's sort of in their court, if they want to take that risk. I was in their shoes, I might not, but if that's what wants, happen, so. I'm wrestling with it, but I do agree with the concept of not putting the cart before the horse. I don't think that should not be a precedent that we should take, so.
Mr. Richards?
Okay, I agree with George.
Okay. So, is there a motion on the table?
Make a motion to continue until, continue until the variance the conditions on the variance are satisfied.
So let's kind of frame this a little bit more. Is it continued until the date in which the decision
No, it's
is
continued.
filed?
It's-
Or is it until you want to go further?
I would, at this point, with no appeal pending, suggest that we continue to the next meeting with the expectation that the conditions, which are not onerous, are going to be satisfied by then.
If I may, the appeal period will not have lapsed.
No,
I'm
he's not
appeal.
mentioning that.
I'm not mentioning the appeal, I'm talking about, at this point, there is no appeal. Continue to the next meeting, and hopefully by that time, the conditions specified by the ZBA will have been satisfied.
The intermunicipal agreement, the information from the siting board in Connecticut, there were 4 issues, I believe.
Yeah, I
that
think
you
it's
raised.
Okay.
3 or 4.
Or close the public hearing and vote now.
Yeah. But we have a motion to continue for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Is there a second? Just for the purposes of...
I'll second that, yeah.
Okay, so we have motion made second. Any discussion? Hearing none? Yes.
We want to make it clear, we do not
Yeah.
consent to the extension or continuation of this hearing.
Yeah.
We feel it is unfair, it is actually, in our judgment, illegal. It is proper for you to vote to approve this site design review conditioned on compliance with the zoning board of appeals requirements for the issuance of the variance, and you do not need to continue this. My client's concern is, of course, further delay, and then coming in here next time, well, somebody's appealed the ZBA, so, we're not going to vote again.
Just get it done.
We'll be here coming back for a long time. You have a long track record of approving things conditioned on compliance. And this is, I think, unreasonable to in my opinion, single out this project for this. And I understand it's unique to you by having the ZBA and the planning board going in tandem, but the petitioner strongly objects to this and requests that you incorporate the conditions of compliance with the ZBA, which one of you just said are simple and can be gotten pretty quickly. So probably before the appeal period of your decision has gone by, we can have them.
Point taken. So we have a motion to continue till our next meeting. It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Would someone help me?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. Motion made to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Someone wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the project, subject to conditions that were also asked for by the ZBA.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So a motion made and seconded. So a yay vote is to approve site plan approval based upon the conditions that were issued by the ZBA being met. Proper?
Fair
Okay.
enough.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
what happens if this is a tie? What happens in a situation if it's a tie? Hypothetically,
It fails.
it fails, okay.
Yeah.
All right, just one clarification.
So we have a motion. Has it been do we have a second?
It was seconded.
A motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
It's 2-2.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Can you call the next item, please?
Let's see, discussion of draft, it can't be the next item. Let's go to updated mixed-use zoning, case ZN 2019-01, mixed-use district petition by applicant M&A. Yes?
You skipped over.
I know, but are we gonna talk about the draft annual report now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have it, or is it?
Yeah.
Discussion of draft planning board annual report to be submitted to town manager 3/16/2020.
So George submitted a draft report for all of you to
Thank you.
review, and I
Okay.
believe it met with your expectations. So I will get that to the town manager along with my annual report that I've crafted. And it gives a nice overview of what we've done. Did we email it to you? We maybe did not, but.
Yeah, I don't remember
saw it.
seeing.
Okay, I do want to make sure I've credited properly. I have Russell Denver, Planning Board Chair. You were part of the
Community
CPC.
for 6 months.
For the first half of the year, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then George, I have you Planning Vice Chair. So this is 2019, so midway you can.
Yeah, that's fine,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right.
I think theoretically, I'm also a associate on the Conservation Commission.
Ah, really?
Yeah. They've never called me for any advice, but theoretically, I'm an associate on it.
Oh, okay. That's not, I have you appointed to the Open Space and Recreation Planning
Yeah.
Committee and PVC, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, Planning Commissioner.
Right.
Okay, but I don't have you as an associate for the Conservation Commission, so, do you have something that I could add to my report,
I don't think it's necessary to put that in
Okay,
there.
all right,
I think
and then
that's just-
Tide, I have you as clerk and alternate PVPC commissioner,
That would be me.
and John, you're serving in 2019 on the Cultural Council and the Community Preservation Commission.
Correct.
And then I wished the best to Lou Morabito, who resigned to pursue a business interest elsewhere. Okay, so, and then I've got some other alkalots with the ZBA and the Conservation Commission. But again, did an overview you took in $8,703 in application fees.
Good.
Is that-
Yeah, 8 A&Rs, 45 site plan waivers, 12 site plans, 14 special permits, and 5 subdivisions in 2019. So that,
We're still in the red.
Yeah.
altogether though, so we had 8, 9, and 5, and $755 altogether in fees. That'll lead me to another topic of considering increasing our fees, but we're not gonna talk about that today.
So I do want to make sure before I lose my train of thought, so we voted on a solar bylaw or solar moratorium.
Yes,
So I guess, how are we doing on development of a proposed new solar bylaw?
sure. So
I
I
had that.
meet.
This was sitting on my desk for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
So approximately once a month, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, Eric Weiss of the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission chairs a committee called the Large Solar Working Group. And we meet once a month. We've been meeting for about a year. We've examined other zoning bylaws. We've looked at several court cases. We've reviewed the SMART project, and we still await SMART 2. So we have SMART 1, all of the blocks are sold out. Some of the issues of concern have been presented to the planning board by the previous applicant in regard to meeting the criteria. Right now, that program, SMART 1, all of the, SMART 2 has not been vetted yet. The state is still doing their due diligence. So we don't have any new information about the second phase of the SMART program. The ultimate goal of the working group is to craft a bylaw that municipalities may use to introduce as part of their zoning code or bylaw. If they have not had a solar bylaw, or to increase the substance of the current zoning bylaw. They have a solar bylaw. So we're still working on that. We hope to have everything in place by June, and then introduce this model solar bylaw for community use, somewhat like we have for subdivision regulations.
So we voted for a 6-month or a
I think it
year?
was 1 year.
1 year?
The moratorium is through October 22nd.
Okay, great, okay. So we have
However-
time to kind of work its ways through the system.
The ball is in the town council's court because they have to schedule that public hearing for the moratorium. So we still await their action. And when we introduced it back in October, they didn't want to pursue the matter until early spring.
Okay.
So we
And
wait.
they're aware of that?
Yeah, they have been reminded.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so that's where we are with the solar bylaw.
Okay, good, thanks. So before we take up item 3, can we do item 4, A and B, because I see the petitioner who might have to drive back to New Jersey tonight in the room.
I'll make a motion to take up go out of order and take up number 4.
So,
I'll second that.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay.
Update to mixed-use zoning, case ZN 2019-01, mixed-use district, petition by applicant M&L Long Meadow LLC to amend the zoning bylaw by adding a new zoning district for mixed use and to change the zoning district map from the town of East Long Meadow. Applicant's agent is attorney Jane Mandanowski, Fitzgerald Attorney Law, 46 Center Square. And then we have case ZN 2019-02, 330 Chestnut, petition by applicant M&A Long Meadow LLC to consider zone change 330 Chestnut, assessors parcel 18-38-0 and 40.35 plus or minus acre site from the industrial garden zoning district to a mixed-use zoning district. The applicant's agent, Jane Mantelowski, Fitzgerald Law Firm, Center Square.
So just for your information, so at each one of our meetings, we get an update on how the working subcommittee of the town council has been progressing. And I know there was another meeting this morning, which I know Tide and Connie were both at, and I'm sure you were probably in attendance. So I guess, and the reason I asked that this be on our agenda every week was really an effort to move this along. And I guess it hasn't worked particularly well to move it along, because I think we as a planning board acted on it in May. So that's coming upon 10 months. Who would like to start on maybe a quick recap of today's meeting and what you see as the next steps toward town council action, it coming back to the planning board if necessary? But I think there's not a week that doesn't go by that someone stops me somewhere and says, how's that project coming? So I guess.
Every day,
Yeah.
every day.
I mean,
This
so-
morning I was having breakfast, a guy came
So,
up to me.
Yeah, so, why don't we start here, and we'll go there, but, Ty, do you wanna? You've been to a fair amount of these.
Yeah, not enough of them. But today was pretty uneventful. It was pretty much crossing Ts, dotting Is, cleaning up the language, renumbering a few things, shifted around a few little areas regarding affordable housing, discussed a little bit about the formula for different types of housing, talked about preferential treatment for residents in the first time through to be able to buy or rent there, things like that. But it's pretty much, seems like we're pretty much there. It's just a matter of getting it done, I mean, improving it.
So, did
I mean,
they,
your take the same as mine?
We also had Katie Lacey from Mass Housing Partnership on the telephone, and Ken Comia, who was present to address the affordable housing element of this bylaw, and I think that we came to a conclusion in a meeting of the minds. So that verbiage, the wordsmithing in regard to that particular section has been solidified. So the next steps after you had left, because this was a 3.5-hour meeting,
They read every word.
3.5 hours.
Every word.
Yeah. It is going, correct me if I'm wrong, they hope to package it up and send it to the town's attorney for review,
Correct.
and then come back to the town council and the planning board for a joint public hearing, because it has changed in substance.
okay, good.
And we should be hopefully moving this, or depending on the public hearing,
So,
but,
so I'm glad you're here, because at our last meeting, we had a short but spirited discussion about, and we have it on our, I believe we have it on our agenda. Don't see it.
our discussion of amending table
Oh,
3.1.
yes, yes.
Item 5.
To include self-storage sites. And there was an explanation of how this came about. I think you were quite vocal, you were not as vocal, but certainly expressed an opinion.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you talked about that today.
No, but I'll give you an overview.
Okay.
At the last meeting, and by the way, we're not gonna go back and rehash all that all over again. It's out the rear window, but I'll just give you an update of what happened. So my feeling was that self-storage for off-site customers should not be considered as a commercial use to go against the percentages. Because I felt that was, a stagnant building that didn't do anything for the project and so forth. Make a long story short, as far as I'm concerned, we could have, it's already behind us now, but we could have, I would have been in favor of reducing the requirement for commercial if part of it was gonna be used for the self-storage. In other words, instead of using the self-storage to fill the commercial requirement, just reduce the commercial requirement and eliminate the self-storage and call it a day. And where we ended up is that the self-storage will stay in and the percentage will stay the way it is.
So, I'm hearing there are no substantive issues left for them to decide. They basically have to get a clean copy and get it to the council, to town attorney first and then to the council. Okay. So are they going to meet again?
Yes.
Okay. In 2 weeks?
No.
No?
They haven't set a date.
That, everybody's not available in 2 weeks, so they're gonna set an alternate date.
Oh, okay.
I don't know when that'll be. Hopefully, we take advantage of the 5th Tuesday.
Yeah, hopefully they will vote to forward it.
But my concern was, I had a couple, but one of them, I could see that being an ancillary use for the residents of the project.
I'm not against that.
Yeah, yeah. But anything beyond that, I found to be like you, would be a stagnant use that wouldn't add to the attraction to the outside to come onto the property. I could certainly see it as an amenity to those people who live there.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
So is a pool,
Yeah, yeah,
which is fine.
yeah, okay. Would you like to add anything?
No, first
As
of
an
all.
interested observer.
No, first of all, I didn't realize that you had it on the agenda all the time. It was, I just,
Yeah.
because I, just in looking at agendas tonight, I realized that it was on, so I was here, so I,
It was really in an effort to get an update from a member of the town council who always seemed to be here about the status of it.
yes, everybody's very upset that both are meeting at the same time.
I caught wind of that today.
But, and I went back and forth between the two, but, in any event. So I didn't know you were meeting every month. I'm always happy, please.
We didn't expect you to
I'm
come.
always happy to come and update the board and
It
let
was
you know
really
where
a
we are.
matter of that subcommittee and their review and the process they were in, and would there be any specific things that we might want to weigh in on? So I thought it was a good give and take, and it was also that effort to just kind of keep things moving.
No, good, and again, I think they've done yeoman work and very thorough and very good. So I think we're in a good spot. They actually did, literally in the last 5 minutes of the meeting, change something. So the setback, the rear setback for the district was increased from 25 feet to 50 feet. Anyway, so, that'll be something that you see coming back that's actually different from what you sent them. But I do understand that they're gonna have their town council, SEL, review it. That will then refer back to the Planning Matters Subcommittee with that recommendation and comments. They'll package whatever that is up the same way they did today, which was literally wordsmithing as they finished. And then that will proceed to the town council for its public hearings and for a referral to you. And then whether the planning board's public hearing is a joint public hearing or two separate public hearings, I think is gonna be up to schedules and everything else. But I got the distinct impression, and I got the distinct impression they all wanted to be finished in April.
Oh, great.
That was the consensus of the Planning Matters Subcommittee, is that they felt the matter would be concluded in April.
So through the chair, we would have that joint meeting in April?
That's
Or
what it sounds
when
like.
we okay.
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
But if they conclude in April, it's gonna be, you gotta have 2 weeks or two, you gotta publish the public hearing
Yeah.
and all that, so it may be early May before we
Yeah.
actually hold the hearing.
Yeah.
Depending, I mean,
Yeah, no, it's all
legal requirements and
Yeah.
all
all
that.
dependent on,
Yeah.
on the time. But again, I think everybody's done yeoman work and very thoughtful and really considered a lot of issues. And I think actually struggled with wanting to go out into fixing the bylaw of other things and actually did a very nice job of saying, no, we're here to talk about this portion of the bylaw, not necessarily. So, again, I thought it was very thoughtful, and I think we have a bylaw that hopefully we'll be able to have a great project. We're looking forward to that.
So what, George, you asked that item be put on the agenda.
Yeah, that's,
So,
is that the next thing on here?
yeah,
Okay.
item 5, if we
Yeah.
can.
No,
You can stay here, but
Yeah.
let's just, shall we move to item 5?
Yeah, I think we should. It was called to my attention by Ms. Richards that our schedule of use regulations does not include self-storage units, okay, or sites. And she could not recall how the first one was approved. It's the one on Denslow, okay, the toy box.
Yeah.
Okay, how that was approved for that district. But we, kind of between us, decided that it must have been that it was considered to be a warehouse. Okay, because warehousing is allowed in that district. And to me, that was important because people were calling it a retail use, and it's not really a retail use, because you're not, any retail that goes on there is secondary to the primary purpose, okay? Selling boxes and things. So, and that in the, anyway. So it seemed to me that we really ought to have a definition of what that is, both indoor and outdoor access, and perhaps additional regulation, and specify what zones it can be in, and perhaps additional regulations for that sort of site, including appropriate screening for outdoor self-storage, because right now the ones we have are not adequately screened at all. Including security, lighting, you know, all the other stuff that's unique to that.
Residence for the manager.
Yeah,
A normal thing in
right.
larger self-storage is the manager lives on site.
And what items can be stored there?
Yeah.
Okay, you know, is there a limit to how big your yacht is before
Yeah.
you have to put it someplace else?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are all, sound like minor things, but we really don't have the proper regulations in place for them now. The ones that are there already would be grandfathered, obviously, because they're there, and you can't retroactively put something on them. But I think we're gonna see more of them. We've got 3 now. We're talking about one in this unit, perhaps.
Teeny tiny.
Other places, getting more and more popular. So we ought to have the right regulations for it. And
Good point, yeah, great.
And we
So-
definitely should.
if you want, I can do a little research, or we can ask Connie to do a little research on how other towns deal with it.
Yep.
Steal some language and go forward with it.
Let's do it.
Great
Okay.
idea.
We like to pilfer.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Any other items? So thank you for,
thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, the consensus on the affordable housing was that we did it right. The language that was there was right, was the right way to handle it, it was done correctly, it was accurate, it was, so I think, you know, we could have ended the conversation right there, frankly, but that was the opinion, was that it was done correctly and protects the town, and I think everybody was very pleased to hear that the preferences that will be enabled are specifically oriented towards the town residents, town employees of the township, you know, and employees of businesses in town, you know, so it's very much
Families with
locally.
children.
Already,
Local children.
yeah,
Right,
already.
very much locally oriented,
Great.
which was good to see as well, and all things that I think everybody would be very happy to implement.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
go
John.
catch the end of the council meeting.
Next item, Mr. Clerk. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but our last visitor is for items,
Ken is here to discuss the model subdivision regulations that were prepared by Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And we have Ken Comia, AICP, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission Senior Planner for Land Use and Environment Section.
welcome, come on up.
Good evening, Board. I'm glad to be here. I'm going to hand out the PowerPoint that George is familiar with. And I did send a paper copy over to the town of the actual document. It's over 120 pages. But I should have enough. presentations here for everyone. Yeah,
think you were
it looks like
emailed.
Connie has that. So my name is Ken Comia, and as Connie mentioned, I am a senior planner with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission in the Land Use and Environment section. I've been with the commission now for a year. Prior to that, I was town planner and conservation agent for the town of Southbridge. But my experience has been municipal planning, so it's mostly land use, master plans, comprehensive plans, and the like zoning. So I think I'd also like to take this time, after we do this brief presentation, because this is maybe something you, as a board, may be exploring on amending in certain time, to talk about the district local technical assistance project that I will be working with the town on with regards to housing. So again, this presentation was given at the planning board, at the planning commission's winter commission meeting. And specific to the section that I work in, we have a mission statement: protecting the natural and human environments of the Pioneer Valley and promoting and facilitating sustainable land use by providing technical expertise and clear guidance that blends community goals with a regional vision to maintain community character, address the needs of the underrepresented, and improve the quality of life. I think it's very unique in that I get to work with a lot of planning boards on specific types of projects which do play into the regional plan. We do have a regional land use plan, and Connie belongs to the Valley Development Council, and we talk through some of the plan's elements over these quarterly meetings that I have during the year with the other municipal planners in the region. So the next slide is a summary of the various types of services that I specifically do as the land use planner, working with the planning board, working with the ZBA, working with conservation commissions, writing bylaws, rules and regs, doing master planning, planning board training, and various other types of functions that support the planning board. How projects get funded. Within the PVC, how I get paid and how I get to do the work is sometimes the town or city allocates money for planning board assistance, so it's fee for service. We do the district local technical assistance, which I'll discuss after this. Local technical assistance, which is project-based, and with East Long Meadow, it'd be 15 hours with the planning department staff. So if there's a bylaw that you're exploring, I can work with Connie and the board to do that if a request were to come in. Funding via grants from other state agencies, Department of Housing and Community Development, the Executive Office of Administration and Finance, which is the Community Compact Grant. And what funded this particular project was a planning grant from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So this particular EEA planning grant, which is a 2-year planning grant and is offered every year, provides technical assistance to improve land use practices, the priorities for program spending, sustainable housing production. So housing production plans have been funded through this particular program, assessments of affordable housing, mitigation of climate change, permanent land use conservation. Examples of projects in the valley: master plan implementation for the city of Northampton, development of accessory dwelling unit bylaw and ordinance for both Hatfield and Agawam, creation and implementation of a green infrastructure design guide in Springfield, downtown strategic plan, housing needs and zoning assessment and production plan update for the city of East Hampton, town center connectivity for the town of Goshen, low-impact development and new stormwater design standards in Southampton, and
I don't think you need to read
this Okay. I was reading for the public. I don't know. I don't know if the public wanted to hear that. Okay, so with regards to the
They're valuable. I think sometimes people don't realize the value, and who is this Pioneer Valley Planning Commission? And you're our regional planning agency. Most of the funding that comes to the communities is through RPA. So it's federal, state, RPA, local. And that's how I think of how our money comes to us.
Sure.
So you play a vital role in
Yep.
planning.
And again, this presentation is available on the PVPC website.
I believe so. If not, it'll be where the
Right.
actual
So
model
if
subdivision.
anyone wants to see the gory details, they can go there
Okay.
and look at it. So if you could, through the chair,
Yeah.
if you just kind of summarize for us.
Sure. So let's just kind of describe what the project was. There were 12 working sections throughout last year, with 6 different communities participating, all of them with various different features. City, smaller towns, towns with a small DPW department versus towns with larger. The partners were the municipal staffs from each town or city, and then our consultant, Larry Smith, as well as staff from the commission. Why these particular towns were revising their model subdivision, their subdivision regulations were because they were old. They were all drafted in the late 70s. Belchertown most recently amending it in 2005. So I don't know what the age of your subdivision regulations are, but my guess is that they're probably older and may not have been looked at in a while. And so I think the biggest thing with
Older
this.
than Jonathan. Sorry, Jonathan.
The biggest thing with subdivision regulations, and I think a reason why these particular communities wanted to look at them, were specific to stormwater and the inclusion of green infrastructure and low-impact development when you're looking at developing housing subdivisions. And I think what we discovered were there were a lot of communities, these specific 6 communities, and throughout the Commonwealth, that have over-designed roadways. They're too large. And so when you have large roadways, what does that mean? You have increased stormwater. And so anything that has been changed over time to shrink or decrease the amount of impervious surfaces has been helpful, I think, for the communities, particularly with all the water quality issues with climate change, just understanding that you're going to have more water, it needs somewhere to go. And you don't want all the water that's being collected on these large impervious surfaces, adding to the stormwater that's already coming down. So you all are familiar with the various sections of the bylaw, of the particular regulations. Each section, there was, through the working group, there were improvements to coordination of plan reviews, ensuring that they followed town bylaw or city ordinances, that there was a confirmation that they would all be compliant with the permitting elsewhere in the municipality, requiring a pre-submission review by the planning board, a preliminary plan, creating stronger language to ensure that a developer would be coming to the town to file a preliminary plan so that the planning board is aware of what would be coming before them when a definitive plan is filed. With regards to that, I think a big discussion item was particular to surety and ensuring that whatever instrument the town uses, that it was collected properly. And there was I think a good discussion on what type of instrument that should be, whether it's cash, whether it's a tripartite agreement, or other mechanism to do that. Another chunk of discussion with regards to the subdivision regulations were design guidelines. Again, as I mentioned, there are these new concepts that have kind of appeared within the past 10 years: complete streets, healthy communities, low impact development and green infrastructure, incorporating those design guidelines and those design standards into the model subdivision regulations. It's meant to be a document where planning boards or whoever is interested in revising these regulations, that they can pick and choose those types of standards should they want them. Another thing that we found during the process was that there was no mention of consistency with other town documents, master planning, no consistency with open space recreation plans, should the town have those. So creating language within this particular model subdivision regulation to ensure that that was the case, should the town want to adopt, a new set of rules. With regards to required improvements, I think the biggest thing was talking about drainage, where possible, having some sort of low-impact development, green infrastructure, understanding that many times when a subdivision is handed over to the town, particular to the town road, the town is responsible for, ensuring that it's plowed, that it's to the standard of the town. And I think that the working group provided some context as to how that can be buttoned up for towns to ensure that, to the best ability, that the towns would have no issue with accepting those roads. So there are specific milestones and guidelines that are within this model subdivision regulations that would be helpful for the town to adopt. Sidewalks, requiring them on both sides of the street, offering waivers if the planning board wanted to do that, as well as street lighting and street signs, and how the planning board could interact or deal with having too many lights or not enough lights, or when they should be turned on, knowing that the town would be responsible for those lights and the cost to light the street. And then I think the rest of the document are the typical other items that you would find in a set of regulations with regards to inspections, and then the fees for the various applications. The biggest takeaway, I think, is that you use your outside consultants to review the site civil, any sort of traffic studies that the board may ask for during the process, ensure that the applicant would bear the cost of that review. There are some other things in the back of the document which show some of the best practices with regards to typical cross-street sections, street cross-sections, some ideas of complete streets, healthy communities, stormwater management, and then the forms you would use on that. I think probably one of the things that came out of this process was just questions on capacity, particular for smaller communities that may not have a town planner, or someone that can help enforce the regulations. And some just comments of applicability, using your outside consultants, ensuring that when you have meetings with the applicant, that they have been in public. LID, Complete Streets and Healthy Communities, that the LID elements, so because, as I mentioned, these LID elements are costly, they're not usually used when a city or town would improve their infrastructure, so it's probably found more in infill development. It would be, I think, a harder sell for the planning board to require that with the DPW having to be responsible for the road at the end of the day, or the detention pond. So that was something that came out of the conversations with the working group. In the Pioneer Valley region, the letter of credit was most utilized, followed by covenants. And then the recommendation of sidewalks on both sides of the street. And then waivers should be granted rarely and scrutinized very carefully.
We just had that discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, so with regards to waivers, I'm sure, you know, in the planning board that I worked with, and probably your own discussions, once you do it for someone, someone will find out what you did for them and try to, you know, force the planning board to act in the same way. The next steps with this is that the participating communities are going through a review process. And I'm working with other communities to revise their subdivision regulations. And we are also looking at beefing up the stormwater and LID complement document to this. And that's particular to the subdivision regulations. You know, and should Connie or the board, you know, want to explore that, we're here.
Any questions? Your representative, George?
Yeah, I really am very happy to see these model subdivision regulations come out, because towns trying to revise their regulations one by one, it doesn't work. We don't have the capacity to go from ground zero, you know. I think it would be very useful if, after we think about it a little bit, we maybe formed a subcommittee to, not having a quorum, to compare the model with what we have, and not to craft word-by-word changes, but to point out those sections that, as a larger body, we need to address. Okay? I mean, one of the things points out here, we routinely grant waivers on street width. Okay? That says something about our subdivision regulations maybe calling for over-designed streets. And maybe we need to think about what the standard street that's going in these days is, and change the regulations to accommodate that, so we don't have to grant waivers.
Sure, great point.
You know, that sort of thing. So, and I'd be willing to work on a subcommittee like that, but I suggest we think about it for another couple weeks and then come back to it.
So can we put this item on the first meeting in April?
Under the work session?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, so 5 minutes. I'm gonna also hand out what I shared with Connie. I don't know if the board has seen this. It is a proposed scope of work for the work this year. Have you guys seen it?
I've seen it.
I've seen it, yeah.
I think we emailed it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
everybody, but maybe if
I
they don't have.
paper copy.
Yeah, we saw it.
I'm sorry.
Good.
So I don't know if there were any initial comments, but in talking with Connie over these past few weeks, as I know that you guys are exploring a master plan, that this could inform a future master plan with a housing chapter. Understanding some of the issues that you're currently dealing with as a town with regards to your subsidized housing inventory, and understanding where you are, understanding that DHCD has the proper number, And so that you're aware of where you are with regards to the thresholds that you may need to get through so that a 40B project doesn't come, knocking on your door and going through that particular process. So I think just quickly going through this, and whether or not it's with this board or with a committee, I'm not quite sure.
I think it's probably with me,
Okay, with you.
and then we'll take it to the board.
Okay.
And we could do this on our work session.
And you've been kind of working with other town departments on trying to identify
Yes.
the housing types and, yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's a full town effort.
Yeah.
But with regards to, ensuring that there's a public participation component, whether or not it's a survey that's specific to housing, whether or not it can be tied in with something else, understanding that you've also gone through some other planning processes in this past year, kind of tapping into that. Looking at the documents that you do have, Connie has shared with me your DHTD count as well as some of the special permits that have been approved, or the subdivisions that have been approved that were specific to ensuring
So what is
Benton
our
Estates.
estimated percentage?
Below 7.
Okay.
It's, so, and that's where we run into some confusions, and the numbers are not in agreement.
Okay.
And I discovered this when I did my state housing inventory report to the Department of Housing and Community Development, when I gathered data from the different department heads. And that's what prompted me to reach out and submit the DLTA request to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, so that we could get our baseline, have our baseline accurate moving forward. And then we won't have such perhaps a moving target once we know these numbers.
Yeah. So ensuring that the baseline, kind of your current inventory, as well as some of the other policies that the town is participating in, that it follows through with regards to housing, just bringing that to the surface so that it can be put into a report. As well as demographics, the most recent. Unfortunately, the census is happening right about now, so I don't think the data will reflect that. However, more than likely, I don't think there's going to be a major shift based on the most recent American Community Survey data that exists with regards to demographics, development and growth trends, and housing. And then working through the community process, through the survey, which would inform goals, strategy, and actions, working with Connie and whoever she wants to put into this committee that we will present this to. Having GIS mapping graphics for the specific chapter, and then presentation of the results to the planning board. And then a final document.
I think if we
Questions?
work with, I'm sorry, Carolyn Brennan
Yeah.
of the Council on Aging, she's the director of the Council on Aging, and also Lynn Booth, who is the director of the Housing Authority, is that the right term?
Right.
I think between the three of us, since they're hands-on with the needs of the people who come into town, and we should be able, and Diane Bishop, our assessor.
Great. Questions for Ken? George?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you for waiting through the first item.
Oh, I like the minutia of planning board meetings. I sometimes miss it.
You sat through the meeting this morning too for 3.5
Three, yeah, so I was in that meeting too.
We got our money's worth today.
Yeah.
From the
We didn't use up
PPC.
all of our time, did we? We have, what, we got 12 hours? My goodness gracious, I hope not.
You guys have a great
Make sure the
evening.
meter's not running
Thank you
yet.
as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. We'll
Thank
be
you.
in touch.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Connie, do you want to, item 7, 8, 9?
So I think we missed George's discussion of House Bill number 4263.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Enact to promote
Yeah,
housing choice.
that has been refiled recently by the governor, and it has some changes in it, but it's basically the same thing. All it really does is to change the zoning law to reduce from a 3/4 majority to a simple majority, to make certain changes that enable housing creation, okay? And they're not only talking here about affordable housing, they're talking about housing creation in general. And it's targeted to the eastern part of the state, where, as you may all know, housing prices are about double what they are here for a similar place. And there's a severe housing shortage east of Worcester, okay? And it's having major impacts on the smaller towns because people are moving out from Boston into the small towns and suddenly they're becoming urbanized. And anyway, but it's basically changing the majority that's needed to make certain changes. And so the actual impact on our town would probably be relatively small, given the composition of the boards right now, but it could be significant if the composition of the boards changes. So it's something to think about.
So through the chair, in the current form of our town, it would go from basically a 4 out of 5 vote to a 3 out of 5 vote
Right.
needed.
Here.
On this board.
And then on the council, similarly, go from a simple
from
majority
down.
to
Okay.
a regular majority. And again, it depends on how things develop in town and who gets elected to and appointed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, George.
And you do have a copy in your package of the bill, if you can't get to sleep at night.
Connie?
Item 7, discussion of the introduction of town center zoning district. This came up, we've had a dialogue about town center zoning. I frankly have not had a chance to look for the old file. That was, you have it. Oh, well, this is the
1996,
town center zoning bylaw proposal is in there?
yeah.
You giving
I
this
thought
up?
it was a separate standalone document. I have this. This
Okay.
is actually online for anybody who wants to look at this document.
It's online, okay.
Yep, enhancing East Long Meadow.
Yep.
Yep.
Town center zoning was the number one item in there,
Okay.
and it was rejected by town meeting.
Well, we don't
Really?
have town meeting anymore, and we're moving away from a supermajority. How's that?
Maybe.
Little blast from the past.
Yeah.
I know. We can take a look at this. I think
So
we've
what
got
is
a-
that called
Only
online?
24 years old.
It's called
Oh,
Enhancing East Long
Some of
Meadow.
us.
Now, this was the 1996 report.
Yes.
That was a few years ago also. I think we're 2010 now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to read, and it's also information that you can use as a baseline.
Yeah.
So, I do have this, George, I don't want to take your
Okay.
copy.
And
So,
this was done prior to Center Square going in.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Also that whole,
a lot of the ideas in here have actually been gone forward, but they haven't been put into the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
Okay,
so at that point in the 90s, so was Rockies there?
Marquis was there, and this big empty field behind it.
Connie, Eversource photovoltaic installation, annual report.
Eversource sent us an annual report, this is a point of information, they're going to be doing their routine, or their annual maintenance for the control of vegetation, and it's a information for the planning board to be aware of. There's going to be activity going on along their rights of ways.
Okay.
Uh,
Pros and cons regarding use of the.
If I could just make one
Sure.
comment on that? That report includes the amount of electricity they generated.
Right.
And they had no objection to doing that.
Right, and they have to submit it to the state, you had indicated
Yeah.
at one time.
Yeah.
So,
So it's not like it's
Yeah.
confidential information.
yeah. Pros and cons regarding use of the Republican or the reminder for legal notice publication.
So there's still some dialogue in regard to returning to the reminder as a form of legal notice in a newspaper of general circulation. The pro for using the The Republican is that we submit up to, we have 3 days, we have a 3-day grace period, right, for submittal of ads. So if somebody comes in at the last minute, we can generally accommodate their request, even though they've missed the deadline. And the schedule is posted online, so people or applicants are aware that we do have a submittal deadline because we have statutory requirements that we have to comply with. So that is a benefit. It is more expensive than the reminder. And so we have complaints from some of the smaller developers who feel that this is a cost burden to them for their development proposals. On the other hand, there is a broader reach. People in the area can read and see what's going on in East Long Meadow. Some people care, some people don't. On the other hand, those who are in the locale like to see this information in the reminder, and they feel that the reach is broader because they get this paper for free. It comes in their mailbox, so they're not buying, or they're not going to Mass Live to see what's going on. My concern is that with the publication known as the Republican, is that we can't call somebody and have a conversation with them if there's an emergency. Bethany sends repeated emails. We use Gmail, so there's no message received confirmation. We don't get that with Gmail. So to communicate with somebody at the Republican can be a challenge, especially if the applicant doesn't pay, we're getting ready to post the agenda, and they haven't complied with the requirements. With the reminder, there's a live body, we can usually talk to them. On the other hand, publication, you're looking at 3 weeks out. So the deadline for submittal, we're looking at a month. So when we get the people who are coming to us in the 11th hour, begging us to be placed on the agenda, we don't have the luxury of the time, the flexibility for publication. So the cost is less, but time is of the essence, and we can't comply. And so they're upset anyway because they can't get on the agenda. So we've been a year with the Republican, I was a year with the reminder. They dropped the ball several times. Both publications have dropped the ball several times, especially around holidays. So, and I don't mean to point the finger, but if you can't communicate with somebody, and it's also time that Bethany doesn't need to be doing, following up on, did you get our ad? Did you get it? Did you get paid? Did you get... So all of those things take away from other duties and obligations that we could be fulfilling. So we're just trying to be efficient.
So what's your recommendation?
Now I'm going to actually ask for Bethany because she deals with this firsthand. So I think that Bethany
What's
should be...
the department's recommendation?
I'm trying to think because I'm so used to what we have now, and I haven't experienced the longer delay between submitting the ad and having it printed.
So let me also ask Mr. Richards, who's a developer, do you want the nimbleness of the shorter time frame to get everything in, or do you care about the cost?
If the cost of my ad's gonna kill my project, maybe I shouldn't be doing the project.
That's what
So
I was
we're not gonna make the decision based on cost, because
Okay.
I could care less what the cost is.
Okay.
I want efficiency, and I want it in as fast as possible, and I wanna get it done. We're not gonna worry about $10 more for an ad.
Well, this case, it's...
Right,
let's say-
$50.
It's like 500 versus...
Whatever.
You know what I'm saying?
You know, I mean-
100 versus what?
Well, what is it usually?
We don't...
It's at least several $100s. Yeah.
So spread over, let's say, 9 houses.
Well, there you go.
It's $75 a house. Okay, if you put it that way.
Okay.
So I think we just, do you agree with Tide?
I agree.
Okay.
Did you take my pen?
Oh, that's yours. I got one right here.
Okay.
Sorry.
You all set? Stay with the Republican?
Yeah.
Thank you. All
Okay.
right, good. Thank you for that.
All right.
And then we have a 2020 Mass Open Space Conference, Saturday, April 25th at Greenfield Community College. I'm not sure if that's going to occur, given the current health situation. They've canceled our community Citizens Planner Training Collaborative, which was to be held at Holy Cross on March 21st, canceled that today. And I think this all remains to be seen, what is going to happen as far as meetings and training.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. But it's, was this free? I think this was
I
free.
think it was, yeah.
Yes, so if you're interested, just Google it and you can sign up or you can let us know, and we'll sign you up. But again, right now, we're seeing one cancellation after another and,
Okay.
Okay.
Last item,
ah,
so is this for us to review?
we did not include the revised site plan review application form.
Okay.
I think we've emailed it to you. We did a broad sweep the last meeting, but unfortunately, I hadn't had time to really go through the site plan review. And what I wanted to include were the criteria. And I feel very strongly that the applicant should be telling us that they meet the criteria. I've been reviewing plans and saying, yes, it does this, but truly the onus is on the applicant to deliver the information. So you as the planning board can review it and say, yes, you comply with our site plan review.
And there wouldn't be any questions on whether there was still anything else left for
Yes,
us to
exactly. And
to think about.
Yeah.
as tedious as it is for some, it truly is adequately preparing the planning board. We don't have time to prepare a report. In other communities, you'll get a staff report. If we had one more body, maybe we could, but
And then there's then the long-term, I guess, kind of CYAing ourselves. They've given us a checklist, they've said everything is included, we've kind of looked through everything. If someone were to appeal and it wasn't included, well, the developer indicated that everything was complete, so.
And I looked quickly at the forms that are in the subdivision regulations, and I actually have some terrific boilerplate documents that are so much more detailed than what we have in the forms that I would want to share with you regarding covenants that I've developed over my career. Because things have been missed.
Yeah.
So anyway,
All right.
we're trying to make you we're trying to give you everything you need so that you can make a well-informed decision, come to the table, and thank the developer very much.
Good luck with your
Or-
project.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.